right, parking that works. I promised you this. All right, now we're going to ignore snow, because if you talk about snow, then you have to analyze that the snow is being pushed up in the winter between the parking spaces. It reduces the parking spaces in depth, and it's usually when you need it. Christmas is when big sales occur, when people are moving around. It's mobile, it's time. So that's the time you need all your cars. Now, we find the most efficient space is 60 degrees. This is 60 degrees here. This is 45 degrees and 30 degrees. That means as you increase the angle, you decrease the distance between the bays. Now, remember, before he mentioned 60 feet. Well, 57 feet falls in that same category. Now, at 60 feet is the most efficient. Why? Because you build this at 60 feet is 90-degree parking. When you pull out of a space at 90 degrees, you cannot do it in one sweep. You must pull out, stop, pull out, stop, and then move. We're talking about time, and time in the space that you do this ties up people looking for spaces, and that backs up while you're doing that. So this is, but the efficiency of this, it's two-way. You can travel. This is a two-way road. You go down this way, you come back this way. You find a space. Now, this is a one-way road. People come in this way. They want to pull into a space. When they back out and they're gone. So the efficiency the efficiency occurs when you're leaving, not when you're going there, because you get to pull into the space. Here you might not have to do the same thing pulling in as you do pulling out. Now, these are 9-foot on centers. These are about 8'6" on centers. That is from point to point here. Now, the efficiency of this at 45 degrees, you end up with a very narrow, at 45 degrees, you end up with a very narrow road. Because at 45 degrees, the car is this way, not this way. And at 30 degrees, the car is this way, not this way. Yes, sir.
I was recently in Indianapolis, and I saw a parking lot which was similar to the 57-foot one.
Yes.
But it had the spaces facing one way, and the other spaces facing the opposite direction, so it could be a two-lane road.
Yeah, but the problem with that is you don't have enough space here for 2 lanes, really.
Really? Is it?
That's the problem.
Because I've never really seen that in Michigan. So.
Yeah, well, I don't think you'll see it too often. It's not a very good idea.
Okay.
It's not a very good. This way, they come in one direction, and they pull in. Makes more sense. Because you can travel easier forward than you can back. That's the point. Any other questions on this? Now, when he mentioned before the bay of 60 feet, many times over the years, we used the bay 40 feet because that works with the module up above. But the problem with that is when a lady goes to get out of the car, she's got a column right in her way. You can't swing the door open. So it's not a friendly way of treating a client. And she won't want to come back if she dirties her dress. And it's not a good idea. But the 40-foot module, which I'm sure you've seen many times, is what is usually done, because they can repeat that module and it works up above. When a 60-foot module doesn't work that well up above, unless it's a lower building. All right? No other questions? All right? Now, here's the cost. These are just rough numbers, but it's something for you to think about. On surface, assuming the land is, within $3 or $4 a square foot, you're talking about a surface parking of $4,000. That's base, that's asphaltum or concrete, and lighting, drainage, and so forth. That's $4,000 space. Now, deck, and you can use post-tensiled, you can use any kind of system to build a deck above grade. It's 15,000, somewhere between 12 and 15,000 a space. The minute you go down below, it's 40,000. Could be 60,000. Depends on what the soil is. You have rock. What do you have to do to get to make the aperture? So that's just a rough time. These are a 60-foot module. You need, if you go to build a ramp-type garage, you need 200 feet to make the ramp from point to point. And in speed ramps or helixes, it's another thing. All right? Conclusion.
Who has questions?
Coming. Conclusion. Be an advocate for your client. Maximize investment opportunities. Design buildings to support its use. Be knowledgeable of owner objectives, use, and needs. If the owner feels comfortable with how you're representing him, and you are his representative, if he feels comfortable with that, he will use you again and again and again. And that's the most important thing, that he knows that you're representing him. You're not over-representing him, but you're not under-representing him. That's what's important. You're being a fair agent. And, all right, architects need to understand the design fundamentals of specific building types. That's what we've been doing. All right? Questions?
There's one more out there for you.
Oh, you got more here. Bring added value to the development process. That's very important. You can bring added value to the development process based on how you represent the client, how you represent yourself, and how you work with tenants, and how you design the building, how efficiently you design the building. Questions? Yes, sir.
I had a question from earlier where you talked about the building that you sold. There's a building that you said that you sold, but it was a successful building. And you also made the comment that if the owner sells the building, then it's not successful. So I just want to, as a general question, how do you measure the success of a building?
Well, I'll tell you, since I'm so old, I knew Bill Zeckendorf, who's now been dead for 35 years. Well, I knew him slightly, and I remember being in a car with him and a banker, and we were driving along, and he says, "That's my building." And the banker said, "Gee, I didn't know that, Bill. What, do you like it?" He says, "I love that building." Well, I looked at it. It was a pretty ugly building. And I said, "Well, Mr. Zeckendorf, I know it's an interesting building, but you've done a lot better ones," trying to be ginger about it. He said, "It's all rented. That's why it's beautiful."
Self-portrait.
Yeah, I know, self-portrait. Anything? Yes, sir.
I have a question. let's say you are proposing a building.
Yeah.
And you are trying to get tenants, or a mall, anything that you're developing.
Sure.
What strategies do you use, and what are the best strategies to use to entice corporations, clients,
Yeah.
to help you fund it or sign a lease?
Well, the best thing you can do to work with a client is to have good demographic information and sociographic information. If you go in and you understand your site and you understand what it can do, the client will be sold. That's what I've found. I mean, having the information is the most important thing you can do in terms of salesmanship. Not being a big, hard salesman, but the information can sell itself. And that's one thing we do in our company, is we have very good demographic and sociographic information. I know Mr. Boxer was here. I remember he made a presentation for us earlier on. And we have very good information about the site, about the opportunities, and so forth. That's what's important. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I know retail is like really fundamental to every development. Retail is fundamental to every
Yes.
development. But is there anything as too much retail, like if the demographics of the place?
Too much retail?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. The demographers tell us that we're going to have 125 million more people in this country by the year 2050. That's 40 years from now. 125 million more people. Now, that's 40% of the people we have today, in addition. Now, those people will need services. They will need to buy things. They'll need to dress their children. They'll need to do things. They have to eat, and they'll have to sleep, and they have all the things that the 308 million today we have here. So projecting in the growth of the country will continue to grow.
Is it possible for a single location to have too much retail for that location?
Yes, that's right. That's why you have to do your numbers. There's no question.
What are the other alternatives then to make a place leasable and successful? Like, what are some of the strategies that you perhaps use other than retail to?
What are the alternatives to make a successful location other than retail? Is that the right
Well,
question?
in a situation like you mentioned,
Yes.
where
In other words, you're talking about a place
For a
for
specific
people
location.
other than
All right.
retail.
right.
I have seen very, very few multi-use locations. A location that could be used for residential, for office, and for retail or hotel. I've seen very, very few of them in my history. I've seen some built. It didn't work. But we've built some with more than one use, but we don't consider multi-use development.
So are you saying that for any given site in a location, there's one, maybe two uses, and
Yes.
that's it?
That's it.
Nothing beyond that?
Now, there's basically a piece of land has a unique use. In terms of the highest and best use, that's what you're looking for, is the highest and best use. You don't want a failure. You want success. You match the land cost against the use. And if the use fits, that is, the demographics and the area support it, if the road system support it. Now, a number of years ago, Urison Company, who were a prominent developer in New York, Percy and Harold Uris, I knew them. And Percy Uris was a friend of the chairman of Citibank. They used to play bridge together, and they were friendly. And he told Percy Uris, he said, "We're going to need a back of the house building. That is a building to take care of computers. In those days, what you guys have on your table that's that big would fill this room in those days." So consequently, he found this site in a place called Blue Hill, which is on the border of New Jersey and New York. And the chairman of Citibank specifically told them they wanted to be in New Jersey because they wanted to save the tax. So he had this site. It was a golf course, a 9-hole golf course he used to play on. It was near his home. And he bought it, and he sent a crew out to survey it, and they went ahead and they started building this building. And they built a 40-story building just like you'd build in New York, with a 20,000 square foot floor plate, with a center core, just like this building here is 24,000, very similar. And they built this building, and then they built a long building, 4 stories high, double floors to take care of the computers. And they were under construction, and he goes, and he picks up the chairman, and they take him out there, and it's got a little gravel road to get to it. There were no real transportation systems, per se, to get there. But anyway, he looks at this, and they go ahead and they made a mistake. Made a mistake. They put the house 100 feet into New York, or the building 100 feet into New York instead of New Jersey. This is called Blue Hill. It's there. You can see it for miles. Stands up on this hill, and a friend of mine who's a developer in New York took me out there and he says, Alfred, you're the most imaginative guy I know. You're going to figure out what to do with this building. So I drive up this gravel road with him. We go into the building, and it's a building you'd go to, you know, that you'd have in New York. The same kind of building. That's all they knew what to build. So I looked over this building. I said, look, it has absolutely zero commercial use outside of perhaps state office or something like that. He says, well, come on, give me an idea of what we can do with this. I said, well, I think what you might be able to do here is make a funeral parlor out of this whole thing. You might be able to take and put a chapel on each floor, and you build quips in the center of this, crypts around the core, and the higher you go, the more you charge, because you're closer to God. And I said, all you got to do is get a funeral permit to bury people there. You need a permit in the country to bury people. He says, it's a great idea. He said, what would you do with the long building? I said, I think that could be used for retail in terms of how it works with people visiting. You could have flower shops. You can have funeral directors. You can have people that sell stone. You can have all these things adjacent to it. He says, it's brilliant. He says, I'm going to go to work on it right now. He took it they turned him down. But anyway, today this building has about a third of the building filled with state workers, state office workers. They've never been able to rent it up. And Percy went to his grave not as rich as he was before he started it.
His grave was not
So,
in that building.
huh?
His grave was not in that building.
No. Anyway, that's any others? Yes, ma'am.
When you take an idea to an architect or architects, how much of it have you already figured out?
No.
And is it different now
I
than
mean,
it was before?
well, no, it's not any different. No. We wouldn't be going to an architect to draw anything if we weren't already in our minds have gone through the demographics and talked to tenants and talked to people in terms of knowing as the site made sense.
Right.
That's what we would do. We'd have a pretty good notion as this is buildable, and we'd check out the zoning, and we'd check out the use and these kind of things. We'd have a pretty good idea about it before we went forward. But your question is good, because we try to formulate it ahead. And then the architect helps us, because The architect comes up with ideas that may be different than ours or better, and that's what an architect should be doing.
Mr. Taubman, in that regard, the story you tell about Albert Kahn and Henry Ford, in a situation where an architect...
Yeah, I mean Henry Ford the first.
Henry Ford the first, how an
Yeah.
architect understood the business.
Well, Henry Ford always prided himself as the inventor of the mobile system of building automobiles, using the chain as a track, moving the car down a track, and because up till then, they would build 5 or 6 story buildings, industrial buildings, and they would use what they called a gravity system of manufacture, where they would take the chassis and they'd place it on the floor, and they'd build it like they'd build a house. They'd bring the motor over and they'd install the motor, transmission, and they would take from a top up on top, they'd be putting pieces together and passing it down to the next level, which would put pieces more on and on and on and on until they got it down to the first level. They'd put it on the car and only drive out the car. Well, it wasn't a very good system in terms of delivering a lot of cars, because people were doing different things and they weren't working on one particular object in the car, which would make them much more efficient. So it was his point of view of this line. Well, actually, Ford didn't design this. This was done by Albert Kahn. He was the inventor of this, and he took it to Mr. Ford, who put it in the Rouge plant. Up till then, the Highland Park plant had this pass-through system, where they had holes in the floor where they just dropped things on down with a winch until they got it to the level they wanted to work on and add something until they put it down. And basically, the way Mr. Kahn designed it, he was the first one to call the roof of a industrial building an envelope. That was his term for it. He designed an envelope, and he was the first one to put the sawtooth in the roof to get the light within the building. And because he could do that, because it was 1- and 2-story building. Yeah. Yes, sir.
One of the last things that you mentioned today. One of the last things that you mentioned today was that the architect should be the representative of the client, and I wanted you to kind of explain that relationship, as opposed to like the typical architect-client relationship. You know.
Well, I think that is a typical relationship, generally. But if I can explain it this way, the architect is a professional. And doctors are professional, teachers are professionals. They're professionals, which means they serve people in a professional way. That's what that means. And a professional way means that they represent the client. They represent him in terms of the best use that they can make in terms of designing a building for his need and use. That explain it? Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
You showed the Renaissance Center to us, which
Yeah.
was interesting. Because I've always found it disorienting inside because of the
It's
symmetry.
very difficult. Still is.
I wonder if, I was going to ask if that continuation of symmetry is of any concern when you have a building designed for one of your developments. Is that something you try to reject, or is that kind of symmetry acceptable?
You mean symmetry in terms of, well, I don't reject symmetry. I don't reject that.
In terms of internal organization?
Circle? Well, there's all ways to do a circle. You know, you can do a circle as a square or a hexagon or an octagon or whatever, but generally, when you're down there, it's very difficult to orient yourself. That's the problem, because you're going around, it all looks the same. There's no really change in in the orientation or the serial vision that we talked about.
Serial vision, going through all those different kinds of spaces, I think gives you a better idea of where you are going and where you have been, because there are all these clues as you move along through the space.
Well,
Not in the Renaissance Center, you're saying?
he's talking
Right, not
about
in the
this.
Renaissance
Not in the
Center,
Renaissance
no.
Center.
I don't think it works at the
It
Renaissance.
does not. But it works. It works in the cities that Gordon Cullen has drawn for us, and I think this is what you try to do in your developments: give people a set of experiences that help them to orient themselves.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. But they built these walks now, these glass walks, which are very interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it really helps you that much.
Yeah.
I think it's still it's a scary experience. All right.
Yeah, I just wondering if you could put Gene Cohn's Kirby building back on.
You want me to sit down?
Yeah.
No, I just want to ask you a question about
Yeah,
it.
sure.
He might want to sit.
I want to sit?
He might want to
Which-
sit.
Yeah, if you want to sit, go ahead.
You want to sit?
Yeah, I was just, the thing
Yeah,
I was just
sure.
curious about is the efficiency of space.
Yeah.
And going back to your premise, this space is, and this may make it back to your question.
Yeah.
This space is very expensive space to give
Yes,
up.
it is.
As this space is very expensive.
Yeah, that's
and
that's
isn't
right.
that space and that space easy?
Yeah, but that's
so
that
tell me-
creates
tell me the
interest.
design resolution.
Yeah. It's design.
It sells.
Yeah, it sells. It helps. So you have to balance the cost of that against the value. I mean, that should be done with numbers as to, look, this is done because this allows this to have a window and this to have a window.
And corner offices you can rent for more?
Right. You can rent corner office from one. This isn't very good corner office because you have that column in it. When you have one of these columns in it, it really doesn't work that way. But anyway, that's the theory. And
So it's the balancing act. I mean, if you go to architectural conferences, a lot of times they'll say talk to the client and tell them design sells. And
that's true.
And you're a proponent of design
I'm saying
selling.
design sells. The question is, weigh that against the cost. That's all I'm saying. You can't. I mean, you can do anything theoretically, but ultimately it won't be built. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is getting a building built economically enough so it shows a return on investment. That's the reason it's built.
And doing things in terms of design that make it desirable for tenants.
Absolutely.
And that's the form. That's the ultimate formula. Is running the building 100%.
Anything else? Any other questions? Maria, do you have a question?
No, I asked my questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.